another Dragon Ball Super Card Game video. This one, it's another kind of discussion video. Today I want to go ahead and talk about Vegeks, or Vegeks, however you want to pronounce it, the leader, and the possibility of him being addressed in a ban, or rather, or something else in the future. A couple things before I begin. The first thing is subscribe if you're new. I know actually a lot of you who have been subscribed is actually watching the video, so I do appreciate that. But if you are new and you've been enjoying the content, these discussion videos and the deck profiles I'm pushing out, definitely subscribe. If you are already, tell your friends. I'm also trying to give away one of the starter decks, not the Vegeks deck, but the the Vegito and as well as Frieza decks. I don't know what to do with them, so I'm trying to give away one of them. That was a terrible idea. All you really need to do is go to my Twitch here on my face, and all you have to do is follow. I'm trying to get 100 followers by the 21st, or wait, no, the 19th of The Last of Us 2, and I'm actually going to be streaming it on Twitch away from all of this stuff just because I really love the game. There's no other reason why. Well, just to play other games, I guess. But if you want to hang out and see how that game is because you don't have it, or you just want to experience with someone else like I want to do, go ahead and do that. Now, the second thing is that I completely understand that we do not have any real events, and that means we don't have any real data. That means we don't have all the top players, we don't have regular players, average players, etc. coming together to actually have that data to be put together. If you look at all the online tournaments, there have been a lot of Vegeks going around and running rampant, but that's really not enough data. What I will say is that if you do play it, either play it or go against it, you will see that it is kind of a problem. I also believe on average it does depend on the pilot, but why not stop the problem before it even begins? Now I want to get two more things out the way. The first one is that I did post Sandy's deck profile less than 2 weeks after it was revealed, or Vegeks was revealed, and the title itself basically shows that, you know, this is kind of the next stage or the next step of tier 1, and maybe even better than that. And this is kind of what we've seen before in pretty much every set, and pretty much every single set has gone through this. Almost every single set, or every other format, I would say. Honestly, it kind of goes with the video of the hot takes where people were complaining, but I think this is a little more justified. And pretty much like every other time that we've had an issue, whether it was when we went through Mecha Frieza and then it got errated, and then we went through SS3 and then that got banned, and then we went through Super Shenron and then that got errated. So we're even only talking about leaders here, since Vegeks is really just the best leader for what it wants to do. But overall, we went through it. It's been addressed, and even Bandai has admitted that it is a problem for those type of decks. And I think this going forward, depending on the data and depending on the results in the future, Vegeks might be the next thing that it will happen to. And to remind you, Vegeks does have a lot of the type of issues that all the other decks that I just listed, where you can't really interact with a lot of things that it does. You can't really stop the multiple things, or it does multiple things during their turn, and a lot of actions per turn. And a lot of those things are basically free. Couple that with all of the Draft Box 5 cards and other things, it just has more things to play with. The bottom line though is that it kind of goes against everything that Bandai is trying to promote and trying to move the deck or the game in the direction that they want it to. Now the other thing, or the second thing, is that I don't think the deck is unbeatable. I will not say that. I've said it from the beginning for other decks when it came to like SS3 and a couple others. But I do think it is degenerate. I do think it is unfun to play against, and I think it is something that shouldn't exist in the game that kind of promotes itself being something else. Now, I've said it before, where if the game itself had multiple decks that had something similar or did something similar like this type of deck, it wouldn't really be an issue. That basically means that if every single deck in the game could or is broken, then it wouldn't really be an issue. That's just part of the game. That's just what you have to deal with in the game. But since we don't really have that even playing field, this is kind of why we have that kind of issue. To add to this, not only can you find how to play against the deck or the cards to play in Sandy's deck profile towards the end, which apparently not very many people watched, but now you have other resources such as Joey from Crossroll TCG, not only his video, but also Marcus Cantarsi's free article that you should check out if you haven't already, and I'll put those things in the description below. At the end of the day, you either play the deck, you play something that beats it, or you lose on average if you don't do that, or you play something else. Which kind of leads to the question, what should we do about it if it does become an issue? I think there's three main options. The first one is banning or errating the leader. I don't think that's really the best idea. It is a starter deck leader, which, you know, if you're promoting this to newer players and it can't really be played, just like how we had World Peace in the Shenron starter deck leader, or the Shenron starter deck himself, it would be such a hit for newer players and people who have purchased the deck in general. Then we would kind of move on to more fair leaders such as Mass Saiyan and Black Mass Saiyan, but then we would have to see if the data shows like, hey, is this an issue with these leaders as well? And it just kind of becomes a mess, and it's just one of those things you have to test out. And erratas, speaking of messes, should be avoided in general, because you just, you know, it's just a mess. Either you reprint a card with errata, or everybody has to know those erratas by heart or look it up in a tournament or whatever. Not to mention, it does add a lot more ruling issues. So like some people might be able to interpret a new errata than the previous text because of it. Now, banning or limiting the other cards such as U3 and as well as the other draft box cards that Vegeks can play either on an aggro or a mid-range sort of version for that deck is probably my vote if anything was going to happen. Not only kind of prevents the other leaders from abusing it, but if we do limit, let's say, the U3 cards, it does limit the free actions per turn that they can actually do within the game. And not only it'll do that, but it'll also kind of reduce the consistency of it. And I've promoted this with other solutions for banning and as well as other issues in the game previously as well. A good example of that was probably Unyielding Spirit Trunks. And you kind of already know what happened to that. But another card to kind of look at is the Bibbidi Super Combo. Although there is kind of a big restriction to black energy only, you kind of saw that in Boo, where Boo is for some reason not being played right now. But I'm not even sure if that's enough. But again, just another suggestion. Now the last option is to introduce answer cards or silver bullets, which is probably the worst option due to the fact that we've tried it before. And it hasn't worked. The biggest example is Cronoa, the one drop. Not only that, people have to purchase more product in order to get that card, which is not only delayed in the time that it's released or previewed to the time that it is actually released, and you still have to deal with that, which again promotes people not wanting to play against that kind of deck. And then you also have to even see it. You have to even draw the card, which simply just doesn't happen sometimes. So with all that being said, let's go ahead and take a look at what people say from the community in general. So Frank actually posted a nice little post a little ways before, maybe a couple days before at the time of this recording. And he said, I had a good talk with a friend of mine, and he said, it's not really worth playing a deck if you aren't playing Vegeks. And what do you think of this format? What is your approach towards Vegeks? With 313 comments, I'm probably not gonna go through all of these like last time, but I'm gonna kind of skim through most of these. And shout out to Frank, because he did say that I didn't read his last comment. Well, now I'm reading a whole entire topic and thread, so there you go. That is my repayment to you. Kevin says playing Hatch. Hatch, I think, actually does have a pretty good place in the format right now. I don't know if everybody's going to enjoy playing that just because of Vegeks, but it does affect a lot of other decks and the strategies behind them. And with all the black support that it has had and has received in set 10 in the previous sets, Hatch is not really a bad idea. It's just that Frank really doesn't like it. But at least it does limit the cards that they can swing with per turn, which is a huge problem to deal with in Vegeks. But I don't know if that's still enough. Falling for opinions, and then what is his opinion? He just says that it's strong, and it most likely will dominate. For me, I said it was no different for any other format. Make sure you play a deck that provides answers to higher tier decks, and you'll be fine. So the issue, not the issue, but the reason why I said this is because this is kind of like the backbone of what I believe for pretty much every format. I used to complain, not complain, but have issues with pretty much every strong deck previously. But I've learned to not only play and understand those decks as you understand this deck, Vegeks, where what does it want to do, how does it do it, and when can it do it, and when can it do it, right? And when you know those things, you can not only make sure you have a sideboard for it, but also understand the swings, understand the removal, understand everything that you do in your own deck. And then you also have to take a step back and to take a look of like, okay, what kind of decks am I even playing? Am I playing a deck that has a good matchup overall and just overall a strong deck? Is it on the same level of higher tier decks and things like that? And I wasn't really doing that. So in my opinion, yes, there are different answers for higher tier decks, but not so much for Vegeks to be beaten on average. It really comes down to, again, the pilot for yourself and the person who's playing Vegeks. I've played it, I played the Vegito, the starter deck Vegito, which didn't have negates or anything in it because I was an idiot on stream on the Twitch, and I still beat him because he wasn't really playing the deck, but I knew his deck pretty much in and out because I've seen it and I played against Vegeks, unfortunately, more often than I have for any other deck in this format. So it's just those type of things. But when you give it to someone like Dahan over here, where he killed Travis Washburn after he plays two opals in one turn, it is really kind of degenerate. So I also cleared it up where, you know, in that sense, I was saying, you know, don't get it twisted. It is a deck that will be touched in the future. That is my promise. This is my question to everybody else, but in my opinion, I think it will be touched in the future. But if you have answers like the things that I listed, you will have a better chance than not having those answers. Basically, I'm not really trying to provide answers, but really answering the original questions. We have to either deal with it or not play it or wait until Bandai addresses it. So hopefully you can kind of see where I'm coming from. I'm not saying that it's not a problem. I said it literally in the title of the deck profile that I posted about 2.5 weeks ago. It is literally a degenerate deck, and it is something that should be addressed, but that might not be coming across that way. And then Yehan kind of expanded on that. It is AIDS, okay. The format is fine. The Vegeks has counters, and I think it's also hella boring to play. Well, that's probably a good opinion, but I don't know if that's all true. He likes it. It doesn't have too much DB5 cancer, only 3 Nagrishi. So only 3% of cancer, I would say. I think this highlights a good point of, like, if it didn't have so much support and so much free stuff, I think Vegeks would be perfectly fine. I think in the scope and the tunnel vision that Bandai had when making the deck in the starter deck, if you just had those two starter decks put together and had, you know, a playset of both starter decks, it's a perfectly fine deck. It is something that you can play against. It is kind of aggro, but at the same time, it is a good deck. Now, what makes it a format warping deck, just like Joey Palladino was saying here, is the support that it had, right? We only had support for Storm because of Unyielding Spirit Trunks and Bardock. We only had support for Shenron Gojira because we had Ramp and as well as for World Peace. You take away those things and it becomes a deck that isn't something that is format warping, and it isn't something that's tier 0, etc. I do 100% agree with Joey what he's saying here, but I think there is some more context and a lot of things that everybody should be reconsidering. And how we should approach it. And again, still not saying that it's not something degenerate. I can't make that any more clear, but you should take a look at all these replies when you can. So the new Storm is going to rule the meta. That's accurate if everybody wants to do that. Zap says his fill is as dominating as Super Shenron was. Yeah, this is all of this I do agree with. Is it tier 0.5? Probably. Got to play Topo. It doesn't really do too much with Topo around. Not only you're tapping 2 energy, in which you can use that for something else, especially Bean or something else like that, but also they don't really need a hand, you know, and the leader effect and everything else like that helps the deck function without a hand. So I don't know. Plus, you can also they can also use the Great Apes after they mill it. So I don't know. Eric, as vocal as he is, said something pretty similar to what I was saying, but with some more context. One of the best decks in the format, without a doubt, and there are ways to beat it and slow it down. Topo, yes, sure, if you see it, and if you don't tap out and die, because they can fight through Topo pretty easily. Blue Yellow Zamasu, I'm very interested in seeing why that is. This from Get Out. Oh boy. If Hash is the move, that's so funny. Frieza Red Blue can beat it, I believe. I would love to see some gameplay on that. I'm not saying that it didn't. That's not the case, but I would definitely would like to see that. Very strong and will top. Yes, it's hyped it up, but there's a reason why things are hyped up. There's a reason why people complain. It doesn't come from nothing, you know. And I would say it's like if there's some substance behind the complaining and as well as the hype, then you should probably listen to that, and hopefully the data will show that as well. Also, I can tell some of y'all didn't suffer through Storm or Shenron Storm formats. Oh man, I've suffered for pretty much all the ones from Mecha onward, and it's so annoying. I've played even like Ginyu Apes myself. That stuff was super annoying, but honestly, Ginyu was fun. But it's those type of things where you go through it so many times, just like, I can tell a lot of people are from Brian Reed are not doing a lot of testing, but rather theorizing. I think all of this is pretty much accurate. Take a look at that when you can. Protecting the people, Nimbus, Beans, and D-Magic. No other answers. And then Dark Power, Black Mass Saiyan doesn't do anything into Vegeks. I don't really agree with that, but I think it does definitely slow it down. And there are things like Crash's Crusher in which they can actually play and not really worry about that kind of card. Pretty sure there's a cool way to be hit, if you know what I mean. He's talking about cooler. Thanks, Trey. And then you can be killed. I've beaten it 3 times with decks of Bully Search and Topo. Okay, cool. Some more cooler. I don't really see cooler beating it since the backside basically says you can't be milled out. But I guess because of the red-blue support and how much it minuses, I can see it beating it in certain instances. With set 10 Frieza, that's interesting. I mean, the hand control is pretty cool, and cooler is good. But again, what does cooler lose to? That's the biggest thing. So Master better. Shut up, Luis. It's aggressive, but if you can stop the replace from happening, it's not that good. That applies to every single deck. So I don't know what to tell you on that one. Jiren wins. I don't know about that. You get pretty much 3 extra turns to survive, and if you can't kill them by then it's kind of an issue. But you know, sending a return just to hear the drama, that's funny. Play a red leader. Yeah, I mean, black in general kind of suffers to red because of all the minusing. But again, you have to see those things and you have to have the energy for it. So hopefully red-blue is probably going to be the best bet for that. And then playing Shadow Dragons, they go to time anyway. That's pretty funny. I don't know if that's the whole thing for that or accurate for this deck. Nowhere is near as good as Storm from our former champion, Jordan Markle. The people were first aggro to take seriously and not be super greedy. I do agree with that. Okay. And most of these things, you know, playing against Vegeks is playing against easy mode. Most of these things, you know, people do agree from what I can see is that it is answerable. It is something that is an issue, and it is something that can get worse as time goes on, because even now we don't really know the perfect deck. We don't even know what could win a tournament just yet. And we also don't know what kind of decks for sure beat it on average that can hold up against all the other decks in the format. So there's a lot of things that go into this. I'm very curious to hear what everybody thinks about that. So definitely comment below. Follow me on Twitch. Subscribe if you're new and join the Discord, because we got the online tournaments and all this other stuff. And I'll see you in the next one, in the next discussion video. Later.